Hello and welcome to Industry Elites. On this podcast, Industry Elites' very own Natalie and Vicki are going to be discussing the latest news trending around the world.
This is part one of our two-part series, so let's get into it.
Welcome to this episode of Industry Elites. Vicki and I are really excited to continue our discussion on education. As we've both suffered through the education process, I think it's a good thing that we can share our tips and really help students as school is starting pretty soon.
In order to be successful and survive, it's always important to look at some tips and tricks from people that have gone through the struggles before.
So Vicki and I ended up finding this article of tips, and it kept talking about how critical it is for the first few weeks for students to really get it right. It kept talking about how critical the first few weeks of school are for new students. And yeah, they definitely got that one right. But then they also talk about that these decisions that you're going to make will affect the rest of your life. I guess that sounds a tad dramatic, but it may be true.
If you've stayed on campus, the people you've met and roomed with, the clubs you've joined, and the activities you've participated in has all shaped you throughout your post-secondary career.
So in these tips and tricks, it's really going to help to prepare you with some survival tips for not only the first few days, but hopefully to translate into some really good habits for the rest of your college or university career.
Whatever you do, be sure to be yourself and try to enjoy your college or university experience as much as possible. Expect to feel some stress and some homesickness, but don't worry, these issues don't last long and don't let them wear you down.
So let's take a look at some of the tips that this article has left us with. I believe there was about 25, but let's see how many we can actually get through. So the first one in terms of the survival guide is going to all of your orientations. So I can remember going and starting university, your first 2 weeks of classes really were just getting to know your professors, getting to know your curriculum, and it was still interchangeable. I feel like people were still deciding, okay, did I want to do this class? Don't I want to do this class? So I feel like that's why going to orientation is super important, and people shouldn't just kind of brush it off as oh, the first 2 weeks of school, I don't really have to go, nothing super important. But then you could get stuck in this really crappy class that if you went to the orientation, you probably could figure that out. Vicki, same experience or no?
Yeah, that's true. So mine had two sets of orientations. It was the before school actually started orientations where they would take you around campus, and it was really camp counselor-y, and that was never my thing. So I really avoided that because it was where you could play games with strangers and you got loot bags and stuff. So I just had no interest in that. I did go to the frosh week orientations where they had concerts and stuff. That was fun. But I did go to the ones you were talking about, the class ones, especially first year, because you have no idea what to expect. No. I kind of discovered in the first 10 minutes of your first class orientation that everything they told you in high school is a lie.
They didn't prepare us for anything. They're you're sitting in grade 12, you're in your class, and they're yeah, guys, all of these skills are going to be so useful to your post-secondary education. I don't think they were.
It's true. I feel like high school was almost making university and college sound like it was military college. It was just some crazy boot camp where you had to be on all the time and all these crazy rules. My first professor swore at me within 5 minutes of knowing him. The rules were different. You didn't have to ask to go to the bathroom anymore. You didn't even have to go to class if you didn't want to.
That's true.
All these kind of things, and that essay format. I don't know if you remember that, but they were what was it? MLA, and they're this is all you'll use in university and college. And then I don't even
citations. I used MLA.
I used APA, and I just remember them drilling that into our heads for the 4 years of high school, and then not using it once, and then having to relearn a whole new format.
Even though they're talking about trying to embed this in our brain, they didn't allude to the fact that there was also then 5 to 6 other websites that you could go on that would help you search the specific book or the specific website and then give you all of the citations right there, and even the in-text citations. So it's they drilled it and they made you scared, but in the sense when you went to university, there's so many other resources out there to help you to complete something in a way easier fashion. I'm not sitting here grabbing a manual, okay, this is the instructions on how to do APA, and going through the document, doing it myself. The computer did that all for me.
Yeah, exactly. There's that one website. What was it? It was literally like citation.com or something.
It's like Cite This for me. It's like super simple stuff.
Yeah, it was nice. It formatted it properly. It showed you how to put it in your actual document. And you could, most of them, you could upload your document to see if you actually did it right. If not, it would correct you.
They didn't tell you that in high school? So it's like, people starting school, make sure you know that exists.
It is true. And there's a lot of things online now for math. Like back in the day, you'd have to go to the back of the textbook to find the answer, but it wouldn't tell you how to get there, not to show your work. There's these apps now where you take a picture of the problem. It shows you all the steps of showing your work and explains it and then gives you the answer. So these things do exist.
So yeah, I didn't even think of the two sides to the orientation though, how you were saying before. There's so many different orientations when you start university or college that I feel like it's also in the sense of overwhelming. So if you could at least go to the key ones, and if you already have a group of friends, I feel like you're kind of set. But for those individuals who don't really know anybody on campus, maybe going to all of them would be good, because then like you're able to meet new people that way. But if you're kind of over it and you just need the basics, the core of what's going on, then just make sure you choose the right stuff.
This is true. I support you in that. So next on our list here is getting to know your roommates and others in your resident hall. So the people that you live with are going through relatively similar experiences, emotions as you are. Everybody is new. Everybody doesn't know everybody. And everybody is really confused and I guess kind of lost in this time. So it's really nice that you can make friends with your res neighbors and your roommates, so you can kind of start going through these experiences together. Even if it's something as simple as just going to find your classes together, or figuring out how to get to the caf, or even where the laundry room is your residence. It's kind of nice to have somebody to go along with. And then too, when you met a lot of your neighbors, and then through your neighbors you met other people and you'd get invited to stuff, and it was kind of like a one big network on your floor. So that's always kind of fun, especially in the beginning weeks when you're all in the same boat.
Yeah, I think that's a nice thing to know. And that's, like you said, the comfort level there is that everybody's on the same boat. My one fear would be not getting along with my roommate. Like, I didn't stay on campus, so I was one of those people that commuted. So I feel like as much as I did get some experiences, I didn't get that full experience like yourself and like people who stayed there. But yeah, what would you do though if you like hated your roommate? I'd be like, hey, I'm moving home now. I can't deal with this person for the next of my first year of school. Like, that would be brutal.
Well, I know at least where I went, within, I believe it was the first 2 weeks, if there was an issue, you could request a switch. It wasn't guaranteed, obviously, because you needed to have like X amount of people still switching. But at my college, the residents were set up as like little apartments. So you did have like your own closed door room. We had a shared bathroom and a shared like kitchenette. I guess if you really didn't like them, you could very easily avoid them. I do know a couple friends didn't like their roommates, and it just kind of caused weird drama. Just like you go into a room and people are just ignoring you.
Yeah, that's unnecessary. It's like making your experience, I feel like, just a lot worse off than it needs to be.
It's true. But one of the good things, at least I don't know if this is how they all are, but the school I went to did it, is when you applied for res, you had a very in-depth questionnaire. So they asked literally everything. They asked like, what are your sleeping habits? What are you into? What kind of music do you like? It was almost like a Match.com
for your roommate,
just to make sure that if you go to bed at 8 p.m. and I come home at 8 a.m., obviously this is not going to work. So they kind of try to match people up. Same with personality traits. You don't want some very quiet person with some outgoing person, and then they just kind of hate each other. So that's kind of a nice thing. And on my res too, you had the options of if you wanted to be just on a girl's floor, or obviously if you're a guy, just on a guy's floor, or you have the co-ed floor where your roommates are still the same gender as you, but your neighbors could be boys or your neighbors could be girls. It's just kind of a mix up.
I think it's probably too how people like live also. Like if you were just like in a house full of like sisters, and then that'd be so weird to have some like guys on your floor, then you have the option to go girls, and vice versa with the guys. If they're like, okay, I've never like lived with girls before, or like been in that environment with them, maybe they're not going to want to put themselves in the situation. So it's nice that it kind of accustoms to maybe what you're used to, and then you're able to implement that and make it as comfortable as possible going into this totally new situation. Because yeah, like you said, like the music, even even like the music thing or like the going out thing, those are all actually important things because they're part of like your living situation, right? Like it's different than just having someone you go to class with and you're spending an hour of time with, but you're probably in your dorm, I'm sure, a large amount of time from finishing schoolwork to even sleeping those 8-9 hours of the day. Like that's almost half of your day at least spent in your room. So definitely makes sense on that front. So hopefully to everyone out there starting school, they're going to be getting some good roommates.
Yeah, hopefully. If not, and everyone's kind of new, just for lack of a better word, try. Be civil. Everyone's going through things and everyone kind of deals with that differently. So if your roommate's a little shy or whatever, don't take it personally.
Yeah. And another thing I just thought of, I guess with COVID, people might not even be experiencing the roommate thing.
Oh, true. You have to live somewhere.
Yeah, but like if everything's online, I guess people just mostly would access stuff there. But what if there's like international students, or I wonder if they're coming back, like even individuals who come from like across the country to go to school. Like what are those individuals doing? I guess they're just doing everything online, and I wonder if it would be like January when they come back or not, or that's interesting.
I wonder how that works. I'm curious. Yeah. Now we'll have to Google that after.
All right. So the next one here is getting organized. So in high school, the teachers tended to lead you through all of your homework and your due dates. But in college or university, the professors are posting the assignments. Often for the entire semester, they'll give you the syllabus and they expect you to be prepared. So it's important to buy an organizer, use an app, or get a big wall calendar, whatever it takes to help you get your assignments done. So wow, is this ever true? And I think one of the things from high school that maybe didn't even help you transition into your post-secondary is that piece where they're always checking on you. Like, okay, well, here's the next assignment, guys. It's all due this week. Oh, why didn't you get this in? Why didn't you get this in? Well, there's definitely none of that in university. Like you're just, even college, like you're just getting a 0 unless you have an excuse or unless your prof gives you some sort of extension. They're really strict on that stuff. Like if they have 800 students, they're not caring about the few of you that don't hand stuff in.
Yeah, it's true. I remember in high school, you would get updates constantly. Like, remember, this report's due next week. This report's due next week. Like, every class. Yeah. And then I found in college, you're kind of on your own. Like,
sure.
You get the major syllabus dates, and then usually when you get the project, they'll be like, yeah, it's due this date. And that's pretty much it, unless there's project checkpoints. At least for me, that was it. I had all the forms of organization that you mentioned. I had one of those giant whiteboard ones in my room, which I actually didn't like that calendar because you had to write the dates yourself. And I was always fearful that I would mess it up and then I would just completely ruin a project because of that. But then I had my phone sending reminders. Then I had a physical like planner. And then I used to write to-do lists for all my projects.
Holy moly, so you're fully loaded.
Art school, man, it kills you. Because it was like
imagine
8 to 9 courses a semester, and it would just be constant projects. Some would be all semester long, some of them would be weekly. It was just a lot to keep up with, and especially too, if I found that if you got kind of tips along the way, you'd have to keep yourself organized instead of writing down random notes on a napkin and just all of that, especially too with your notes. I would have a notebook, and then what I would do is I would go to class or a lecture. I would write everything down really, really quick. I found that I could write things by hand, very sloppy and completely unreadable, but I could do it faster than typing.
Yeah.
Especially
that's interesting too.
Yeah, I would write everything like MSN. Like it would just be like width would be like the W with the line above. Like I would just write it in crazy point
super short form.
They would be almost like code just for me. Like if you read my notebook, you would have no idea what I was talking about.
You'd have to like dissect it. You're like, okay, like this like Morse code right now.
Pretty much. So then what I would do is then after the lecture, I would go home and I'd rewrite it or type it out. And for me, that really helped me study and stay organized. So not only are you rewriting it to get it kind of drilled into your head, you're making your notes all basically pretty and organized. So that really helps a lot. And one thing I found with me is first year, so I went to school for graphic design, you get an art kit. The art kit, it was honestly like $3,000 worth of art supplies. So if you can imagine how big it was.
Gosh.
And you get a portfolio book. And this portfolio book, and I'm not exaggerating at all, is probably 4 feet by 2.5 feet. It's just absolutely massive. Like if I put the strap on my shoulder, it would pretty much be touching the ground. And I'm 5'10".
Wow.
So if we put the size for everybody to kind of get a visual on. So you could always tell first years in my program because they would cart this thing around everywhere. And this thing would be full of paper, X-Acto knives, pens, rulers, like anything you could need to do any art thing. We would lug it around everywhere for honestly like the first month. And then you could tell how like comfortable we got because then we would just show up to class with a pencil and a sketchbook or what you would need for that specific class. So it's just funny how organized you start, I guess, and then how you kind of get into a rhythm. And not that you're getting unorganized, you just realize you don't have to be so hardcore about it.
Yeah. It's better to start off at like 150 to land yourself around like that 80 to 90%. Because even, yeah, like you said, I had all of those things in the beginning, but then more so I think what had stuck with me the few years after was I'd input my syllabus, like any of the big assignments, that would be in my calendar. Like, so the calendar would link to my phone, plus it was already on my laptop. So anywhere I was looking, I would already see it. And then I had virtual sticky notes, like the sticky notes app that's on your computer. I downloaded that, and then each class would have a sticky note. So anything upcoming, I'd have each time I'd open my computer, I would see it right there. And I feel like that's what would always trigger me. Okay, I got to work on this. I have this next, that, because it kind of works as your to-do list as opposed to just having something in a calendar. You're like, oh, I have a week to do this. Oh, I have like 3 weeks to do this. And then it's like, oh, your 3 weeks are already up. So it's like, if I have that to-do list, it also kind of helps to ignite the motivation in a sense to get whatever task I needed completed, hopefully just before the due date.
Also found that it helped with, at least I had a couple, I don't know if I want to say projects, but you know those like discussion boards you'd have to go online and answer a question or whatever. I found that for me, those were always due at like weird times. Like it would be due next Tuesday. Midnight, but it would be, mine were always like, it'd be due next Tuesday at noon. Or like,
oh, that's weird.
2:30 or because I think what they were trying to do was avoid the midnight rush. We've all done that a million times. But I thought those helped a lot too because if I just wrote my assignment was due Tuesday, I would have the automatic it's due at 11:59 Tuesday, but lo and behold, it was due at noon on Tuesday. So that also really helped you kind of keep that.
I think the next item they had listed here was finding the ideal place for you to study. So within going to school, and if you were staying on campus, that could be your dorm room or a cozy corner in the library, but finding a space to get your work done is super imperative, something that has you avoiding as many distractions as possible. So I think everybody had that spot with in between classes that, okay, I'm going to go to the library, I'm going to this place, or I'm going to that place, just to give yourself that time to complete it during the day, because if you're already there, you might as well. But going in with COVID now and the learning from home, I think finding not even that space to study, but that space to complete your work, that each day you're going to go to this place and it's going to allow you to be productive, is something that people are going to need to consider too.
Found for me personally, that space has always been my room because I had open labs. So it's basically a computer room full of people. The computers were put together in like an octagon shape. So you're kind of in like a giant. And I always found that was really difficult because we'd all basically be hanging out doing our work. And I found for me, being the social butterfly that I am, is I was more interested in talking than I was working.
Yeah.
So
no, I know what you mean though.
Yeah, like in even like group studies, like we all know that's a lie. Like you're not going to actually study. Let's be honest.
Talk about how horrible that class is and oh my gosh, how are we going to make it through, guys? And then your last like 30 minutes is like, okay, let's review page 5.
Yeah, exactly. And you review the first paragraph 5 times. That, and then I found the library too. I always thought it was kind of like annoying because it's like if I have to get up and go to the bathroom or if I want to go grab a coffee or something, I have to pack up and bring everything with me versus like just leaving it as you would in your room. And I just find in your room, you can get comfy, you can close the door, you can have the option of silence or music or have the TV on, and you're alone. Like you can close the door and you're done. And even in res, like you could put a sign in the door. We kind of have like an open door policy to the main room. So people would either just like knock and walk in or we'd literally leave the door open. But if it was your room door was closed, that was like business time. Like this is when someone's working or someone's sleeping. Like that's what I found was the easiest. But I know everyone's different. A lot of people like the library. I'm not even sure the library was in my college, to be honest.
You didn't even know where it was.
I'm honestly trying to think about it now. It was like a courtyard thing, and there was windows to it, but I don't actually know how to get there. Like, I know where it is-ish in the building, but I don't know how to enter it. Disclaimer, I wasn't a slacking student. It's just I did not need it. I just didn't have any research to do.
One thing you were saying there that brought back some memories when you were saying that if you go to the library, you're like the only person there. So if you have all of your stuff, it's kind of like you'd have to take it with you. But I remember when I would ask people, or people would ask me like, hey, can you watch this stuff for me? And I was always like, so if someone comes up to me and like tries to take this, but I know it's not their stuff, what am I supposed to fight this person for this stuff? Like, how far would someone go to protect something that's not theirs?
You could walk up and be like, this is my friend's laptop. She told me to get it. And you would just be like, oh, okay. Not knowing anything. And then that person comes back and they're like, what the heck? Yeah, I always thought about that. Or it's kind of like a little nice, like, hidden compliment. It's like, oh, you think I'm worthy enough to not steal your stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, you think I'm not going to go through that awesome lunch that you have over there because I have to go down probably like 20 minutes to go pick something up now. But I mean, yours looks pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. So the next one on our list is probably the most important one. And I highly recommend it as someone who avoided certain classes like the plague. The fifth on our list here is go to class. Pretty obvious. Sleeping in, skipping that 8 a.m. class. Everybody wants to do it. You can get a pass. I'll give it to you. But you can't make it a thing. A lot of the time, you do get a percentage just for attending. And it's usually a pretty high percentage. Like, most of the time, it's like 10 to 15% for literally just being there.
Yeah, especially in first year. First year, I think that was big.
Like, for mine, it was very big. Like, even if you didn't do anything while you were there, you were just physically in that seat. And that was kind of, for a better way to say, good enough. A lot of the times, too, some people have labs. And if you just don't show up for the lab, that's an automatic 0. Like, you can't redo the lab. A lot of times you get work right then and there that you have to finish that day. Or sometimes it's just something that no matter how hard your friends try to explain it to you, you had to be there. And it's just not a good habit to get into, because I know, especially come the winter, and you don't want to get out of bed just to do an 8 a.m. lecture about something incredibly boring, you still have to go.
No, it's true. And I think some of the things that I had where the participation was really counted was the tutorials. So you had your lectures, and those could be like 2 to 3 times a week, maybe for like an hour or so at each time. But then each class was maybe also assigned a tutorial. So it's like a smaller discussion group led by like a 3rd or 4th year student, where you'd have the opportunity to do a little bit more work and earn your participation and handing in assignments. Usually the tutorial leader would be able to mark those for you. And one thing that happened was that if you were already doing a little bit poorly with some of the assignments, plus also missing lecture and then also missing tutorial, then you were essentially really not doing anything for yourself, because a lot of the times the things that we talked about in tutorial were things taken from class. So it was all interconnected, where if someone didn't go, like, you knew looking at that student when they were answering that question, you're like, you didn't even go to class.
Yeah, exactly. And especially too, professors notice this. They will have kind of a general idea who's going to class, who's not. And especially when it comes to your work, kind of an instance where it's like they understand that life happens, but then when you go to beg for a passing grade and you've showed up for 2 classes, they're not going to give you that. And especially too, it kind of comes down to this isn't high school anymore, you're paying for this. In a way, without making it sound so daunting, is like the rest of your life kind of depends on this. If it's this program or not, you still really need to go. And I know it's especially easy not to, because there's kind of no instant repercussions for not going to class. It's not like in high school, if you skipped, you knew you had to get home before your mom because there'd be a voicemail saying that you didn't go to class. They just don't do anything. The teachers don't care if you don't come or not. So definitely go to class.